It was 2 in the morning when the pounding on my front door started. Not polite knocking. It was desperate. By the third knock, I heard crying. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbor Grace, barefoot, shaking, and clutching her arms like she had run through a storm. The second I opened the door, she lunged inside and slammed it shut behind her. Her eyes were full of terror. "Please," she whispered, "lock every door and turn off the lights. They're coming. Please don't ask questions." Before I could process what she said, I noticed the blood on her hands and the long scratch marks down her face. And then I saw something move across my yard, a shadow of someone standing just beyond the tree line, watching my house. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from, because after you hear this, you will never ignore a knock on your door the same way again. My name is Isla Warren. I'm a registered nurse, and I moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago after a difficult breakup. I wanted peace, a fresh start, and a place where I could sleep through the night without sirens or shouting outside my window. My house sits at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac surrounded by tall pine trees and friendly neighbors who wave when they see you in the driveway. At least that's what I thought. Grace, the woman who was now trembling in my living room, lived 2 houses down. She was quiet, gentle, and always avoided small talk. I would see her gardening in the evenings or sitting alone on her porch with a sketchbook. A few times I noticed bruises on her arms, but when I asked if she was okay, she always said she fell or bumped into a cabinet. She never had visitors. She never talked about family. She just kept to herself. That night, I had been sitting on my couch with a blanket over my legs, reading a book and drinking herbal tea. I remember feeling grateful for the silence. It was rare in my life to feel calm. Then, the banging started. It cut straight through the stillness and set every nerve in my body on high alert. When Grace burst inside, she locked the door with trembling fingers. Her breathing was shallow, and she kept glancing at the windows like she expected someone to break through at any second. "Grace, you're hurt," I said, moving toward her. She flinched when I touched her arm. "Who did this to you?" She shook her head. "We don't have time. Just do what I say." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet filled with urgency. I turned off the lights and shut the curtains. The only illumination came from the dim glow of the lamp on the end table. Grace moved to the center of the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if trying to hold herself together. I could hear something outside now, car doors closing softly, gravel crunching under heavy boots. Our neighborhood was usually quiet at night, but now there were people moving with purpose, surrounding the area. My instinct as a nurse was to help her. My instinct as a woman alone in a house with a terrified neighbor was to protect both of us. My mind raced with questions. Was it her ex? Was she running from the police? Was someone hurt? But the look in her eyes told me this was something much bigger. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This wasn't random violence. This was something planned, something organized, something coming straight for us. And I had just opened the door and let it in. Grace stood in the middle of my living room with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, like she was trying to stop her body from shaking apart. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I could see the panic in her eyes. But what scared me even more was the way she kept glancing toward the windows without moving her head, like she was trained not to draw attention to where she was looking. I moved slowly toward her, hands lifted to show I wasn't going to touch her unexpectedly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel each beat in my throat. "Grace, you're bleeding," I said softly. The sleeve of her shirt was soaked in dark red, but instead of looking at the cut or asking for help, she backed away from me. "Don't turn on any lights," she said. "Don't go near the windows. And whatever happens, if they knock, do not open this door again." Her words came out fast, as if she had rehearsed them. She pressed her palm against the wall to steady herself, and I could see her knees starting to buckle. I guided her carefully to the couch. Her skin was ice cold, and every muscle in her body was tense. "Who is out there?" I asked. "Do you need a doctor?" She let out a short breath. "You can't call anyone. Your phone is already compromised." The moment she said it, my phone buzzed on the table. The screen turned on for a split second, showing a blank caller ID, then went dark again. I had seen that happen before, at the hospital during lockdown procedures when communications were being intercepted. Grace's eyes filled with tears. They're already in the neighborhood. Her voice broke. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could get away alone, but they followed me. They always follow. I peered through a tiny gap in the curtain. 3 dark SUVs were parked down the street, engines still running. The headlights were off, but I could see figures moving between the trees, spreading out with silent precision. These were not random criminals. These were professionals. My instincts screamed at me to hide, call the police, or run, but nothing seemed safe. Grace reached into the pocket of her sweatshirt and pulled out a small flash drive. Her hand shook as she placed it on the coffee table. If they find this, she said, they won't just kill me. They'll kill anyone who has seen me tonight. That includes you. I stared at the flash drive. What's on it? She swallowed hard. Proof of what they're doing, of who they really are. I sat beside her, trying to control my breathing. Grace, I need you to explain. Who are they? She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a motion alarm went off on my security camera system. My phone buzzed again, displaying a notification. Motion detected. Backyard. I tapped the notification to open the camera feed. What I saw made my blood run cold. A man dressed in black tactical gear was in my backyard, scanning the house with night vision goggles. He was not trying to break in yet. He was waiting for someone to give an order. They don't break doors, Grace said. They don't leave evidence. They make you disappear. Her voice shook, but it wasn't just fear. It was certainty. She had seen this before. I quickly locked the back door and every window on the first floor. As I passed by the front hallway, I noticed something on the floor I hadn't seen before. A set of muddy footprints leading to the door. Not mine, not Grace's. Someone had been watching my house long before she knocked tonight. Grace stood up despite the pain in her arm. They already know I'm inside. The only reason we're still breathing is because they're waiting for orders. Orders from who? I asked. She hesitated. Then, in a quiet, broken voice, she said, someone who doesn't exist on paper. Someone above law enforcement, above government. The facility I worked at isn't listed anywhere. It was never meant to be found. I didn't even know what it really was until I saw what they were doing to people. She pressed her hand over her mouth as if trying not to relive it. They take people who won't be missed. The homeless, patients with no family, children from overseas. They experiment on them. They call it medical advancement, but it's torture. A branch snapped outside. Both our heads jerked toward the sound. We could hear voices now, low and steady, communicating through earpieces. My pulse raced. The safe, quiet life I thought I had was gone in a single night. Grace's next words confirmed what I already suspected. You opened the door, she said softly, looking at me with eyes full of guilt. That means you're in this now. If you stay, they will kill you. If you run, they will hunt you. But if we fight, if we expose them, we might live long enough to see justice. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about helping a neighbor. This was about choosing who I was going to be when faced with real evil. And I knew there was no turning back. My mind raced through every possible choice, every exit, every scenario, but every path ended the same way, with danger closing in. I looked at Grace, hunched forward on my couch, clutching her side. Her breaths were growing shallower, and I saw a spreading stain where the blood had soaked through her sleeve. Instinct took over. Lie back, I said, grabbing my first aid kit from the cabinet. She tried to push my hand away. There's no time, she murmured, but I ignored her. If you pass out, you can't run, you can't fight, and I can't carry you, I said, my voice steady even though fear coiled in my stomach. As I cut the sleeve open and cleaned the wound, Grace's eyes welled with tears, not from pain, but from something deeper. Why are you helping me? She whispered. I looked her in the eye. Because you came to my door. Because you asked me to. Saying it out loud made something settle in me. I was scared, but I was no longer confused. I had made a choice. She had no one else. And now, whether I liked it or not, we were in this together. The house was silent, except for our breathing, until a faint crackling sound came from outside, like someone stepping on dry leaves. I moved quietly toward the window and saw two men dressed in black approaching from the side yard, carrying rifles with silencers attached. They were scanning the house with small thermal devices. I realized they weren't just looking for a break-in, they were tracking heartbeats. Grace saw them too and closed her eyes in resignation. "They don't leave until they have what they came for," she said. "They track movement, breathing, body heat, but they can't track what they can't see." As she said it, something shifted in her expression. She reached shakily into the inside pocket of her jacket and pulled out a small metallic device, like a flash drive, but thicker. "This blocks thermal signatures for short periods," she said. "I stole it from the facility. It's our only chance to move without being seen, but it only works for 1 hour." Everything inside me tensed. We had to escape, now, or wait until they eventually breached the door. I turned off the last remaining light and motioned for Grace to follow me to the basement, where the back door led out toward the tree line. As we moved in silence, she explained in a low voice, "The flash drive on the table. They want it destroyed. It contains audio recordings, video files, and testimony logs of everything they've done. It's enough to bring down very powerful people, but only if it reaches someone outside their control." My pulse quickened. "Who do we give it to?" I asked. "There's a federal contact," she said. "He's the only one not compromised. If we get it to him, this ends." Before I could ask how we would find him, a sound like static filled the house. It was coming from my baby monitor. I had left one upstairs since my niece often visited. The monitor crackled again, but this time it wasn't static. A man's voice, cold and calm, spoke through it. "Grace, stop running. You know how this ends. Come outside and no one else gets hurt." I froze. They had hacked into my home network. My own devices were being used against me. Grace went pale. I could see her hands trembling, but she clenched them into fists. She looked at me with fierce, desperate eyes. "If I go out there, they will kill me in front of you to scare you into giving up the drive. If I stay, they will kill you first. The only thing they won't expect is if we move now." My breath felt heavy in my chest. I heard footsteps upstairs. They had entered the house. Time had run out. Grace activated the thermal blocking device. The lights on it turned from red to blue, casting a faint glow. "Stay close to me," she said. In that moment, every part of me that still wanted to believe in law, in safety, in a normal world, broke away. This wasn't a situation where the police could help. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hunt, and we were the targets. I grabbed the flash drive, stuffed it into my jacket, and guided Grace toward the back door. Outside, the woods loomed like a dark wall, but they were our only chance. The moment we stepped into the night air, I could feel my senses heighten. Every sound, every rustle of leaves, every breath taken felt amplified. We weren't just escaping. We were heading straight into the truth. And from that moment on, I understood, with absolute clarity, that I was no longer just helping a neighbor. I was stepping into a war I didn't start, but I was going to help end it. The moment we stepped into the woods, the cold air hit my face like a warning. My backyard, which once felt peaceful and safe, now looked like the edge of a battlefield. Grace clutched the thermal blocking device tightly, her arm pressed against her ribs to control the bleeding. Every step she took seemed like it cost her strength, but there was no hesitation in her eyes anymore, only determination. The flash drive inside my jacket felt heavy against my chest, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented, the truth that people would kill to bury. We moved through the trees, staying low, using the darkness as our shield. Behind us, I could still hear faint voices and distant footsteps. They were inside my house now. They believed they had us surrounded, but Grace had one advantage. They were underestimating her. They assumed she was broken. They assumed I would panic. They had no idea we were already 2 steps ahead. We reached an old utility road at the edge of the woods that led toward the abandoned storm shelter Grace had told me about earlier. The path was muddy from last night's rain, and branches snapped under our feet no matter how carefully we stepped. Grace suddenly held up her hand and stopped. I froze. Up ahead, through the trees, I saw headlights. 2 SUVs had already positioned themselves on the road. Their engines were off. Their doors were open. They were setting up a perimeter. We turned in the opposite direction, deeper into the woods. I could feel the fear rising in my chest again, but I forced myself to stay calm. Panic was what they wanted. Panic made people predictable, and predictable people were easy to hunt. Then I heard it, a faint buzzing sound. In the sky, I looked up and saw a drone overhead, its silent rotors gliding through the air. It paused slightly above us, hovering like an artificial predator sniffing out prey. Grace raised the thermal blocking device higher. The drone hesitated, its lights flickering as if it had lost our location, then continued moving past us. But we both knew the device wouldn't last much longer. Grace's breathing was getting worse. She stumbled, and I caught her before she hit the ground. "Keep going," she whispered. "If they find me, take the drive and run. Do not look back." I shook my head fiercely. "We leave together," I said. "Or not at all." Her eyes softened with something like gratitude, but then she winced in pain. We didn't have time for words. A noise behind us made me spin around. I saw a silhouette approaching, moving slowly but confidently. A man's voice cut through the trees, low and controlled. "Grace," he called out. "You know how this ends. Don't make it worse for yourself. You were never meant to leave." Grace stiffened. The voice was familiar to her. I could see it in the way her posture changed. "Who is that?" I asked under my breath. She swallowed hard. "Dr. Kane. He's the head of the facility." Her voice shook slightly. "He's the one who created the program. The experiments were his design." Dr. Caney stepped into view. He was not what I expected. No lab coat, no crazed expression. He looked calm, clean-cut, dressed in a dark overcoat. He could have passed for a professor or a CEO. That made him even more terrifying. "You've caused a great deal of trouble, Grace," he said, stepping closer. His eyes flicked to me. "And you've involved an innocent. That wasn't necessary." His tone was disturbingly polite, as though we were inconveniencing him. Grace stepped in front of me, despite her pain. "You experiment on human subjects," she said. "You call it advancement, but you are torturing people." Dr. Kane's expression didn't change. "Sacrifice is necessary for progress," he replied, "and you were never supposed to see that side of it." I took a step forward. She saw enough to know it's criminal, and the world is about to know too. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then he smiled, not out of amusement, but out of certainty. "You think you can expose us? The drive you stole only contains a fraction. Everything on it is encrypted. No one will believe you." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the flash drive. "That's where you're wrong," I said. "There's someone waiting for it, and they already believe." His expression changed for the first time. His confidence flickered. Suddenly, a helicopter's spotlight burst through the darkness, flooding the trees with white light. Grace shielded her eyes. I looked up. It wasn't their helicopter. It was federal. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "Do not move! You are surrounded!" Dr. Caney's men raised their weapons, but before they could fire, red laser dots appeared across their bodies. Agents in tactical uniforms emerged from the trees. From behind them came someone I didn't expect. My brother, Tyler, holding his badge high. "Isla, drop down and cover Grace!" he yelled. Everything happened at once. Dr. Caney lunged toward us. I shoved Grace to the ground and covered her as shots rang out. Agents tackled the men in black. The drone overhead crashed to the ground. Tyler ran to us and pulled us to safety behind a fallen log. "You're safe," he said urgently. "We intercepted the data transfer, and the whole world is watching now." For the first time that night, I felt it. Not fear, not adrenaline, but the beginning of justice. In the days that followed the raid in the woods, my life changed in ways I never imagined. The footage from the flash drive, combined with files recovered from the facility, triggered the largest federal investigation in decades. It sparked global outrage. Senators were questioned. Medical boards were stripped of power. Secret funding trails were uncovered that connected trusted institutions to black operations that had no legal existence. The story dominated every news headline. not as a mystery, but as a confirmed act of human experimentation hidden beneath layers of false research grants and charitable medical initiatives. At the center of it all was the face of the man who had been hunting us, Dr. Jonathan Kane, now exposed as the architect of a multinational criminal network. Grace was placed under federal protection, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw a different expression on her face. Not fear, not exhaustion, but relief. She had been living in silence for years, trapped by knowledge that had destroyed everyone around her. Now, she finally had a voice, and the world was finally listening. I visited her in a secure recovery facility where she was being treated. She sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunrise with calm eyes. "I never thought I'd see the sky without worrying someone was watching me," she whispered. For a long time, she had carried the belief that she was running alone. Now she understood she was never alone. She was simply waiting for someone to open the door and stand with her. My brother Tyler received recognition for his role in the arrest, but it wasn't celebration that filled our conversations. It was reflection. "What happened shouldn't have been possible," he said one evening as we sat on my porch, "but it happened because people trusted the wrong ones and doubted the right ones. The system didn't protect Grace. You did." His words stayed with me. I had always believed justice was delivered through authority, through systems and institutions. Now I understood something deeper. Justice often begins in ordinary places, like a neighbor's knock in the middle of the night. In the neighborhood, everything felt different. The people who used to nod politely now approached me with questions mixed with admiration and disbelief. Mrs. Whitman, the elderly neighbor, brought me a basket of muffins and gently held my hand. "I saw those men that night," she said. "I prayed someone would have the courage to act. You opened your door, Isla. Most people would have turned off the lights and pretended not to hear." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pride. The news networks moved on, as they always do, but the impact remained. A national inquiry exposed dozens of similar hidden operations. Families found answers about missing loved ones. Countries launched independent investigations. What happened in my neighborhood was no longer seen as a strange, isolated incident. It became the spark that lit a global demand for accountability. As for me, I went back to work at the hospital. My patients didn't recognize me from the news, and I was grateful. I didn't want fame or attention. I wanted normal life to return, but normal had a new meaning now. Normal wasn't silence. It wasn't ignorance. It was awareness, strength, and the willingness to act when it mattered. One evening, as I locked up for the night, I heard a soft knock at my door. This time it wasn't frantic. It was gentle. When I opened it, Grace stood there with a faint smile. She was thinner, still healing, but there was peace in her eyes. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stepped forward and hugged me. When she spoke, it was not with fear, but gratitude. "You saved my life," she said. I shook my head. "You saved yourself when you chose to run. I just opened the door." In that moment, I realized the true lesson of what happened. Danger does not always come roaring with warning signs. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the shape of someone begging for help. What you do in that moment could determine not just someone else's fate, but your own. We choose who we become in those moments. We choose fear, or we choose courage. My life will never be the same, but I don't want it to be, because now I know the kind of person I am when everything is on the line, and I can live with that. If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and your support is what keeps powerful stories like this alive. I was sitting with my mother and daughter in what